Welcome to MASSCreative's weekly virtual policy and action update. It is Friday, May 29th. I am going to divert a little bit from our normal format because I just want to take stock of where we've been and where we are headed. So let's get started. So let's just take a minute to think about or to remember what we know. So 11 weeks ago, Governor Baker declared a state of emergency for the Commonwealth. And since then, we all have done the things we need to do to take care of our families, our networks, and our communities by self-quarantining, canceling and closing our businesses, and canceling our arts and cultural events. That's meant real impact to our sector. And thanks to the Mass Cultural Council, we have some very specific and stark information about what that really means in the short term. This is the other thing that happened is yesterday, Mayor Walsh announced the cancellation of the Boston Marathon that had been previously rescheduled to September. And I note this because I think it's an important mile marker in terms of just noting the long road we have towards returning to large gatherings of people, which is for many of us, the lifeblood of our work. Here's what we also know. We know that our sector is necessary. We are an economic engine of the Commonwealth. We provide community connection. We also support the overall health and wellness of our cities and towns, our networks, our audiences, and communities. Our sector is diverse. There is arts and cultural activity happening in every city and town in Massachusetts. We are large arts organizations and small volunteer-run cultural organizations. We are individual cultural workers, artists, teaching artists, and arts administrators. And we've already seen how our sector is adapting and pivoting to this moment of crisis. I think this is especially important because to me it denotes is that the need for our work and for our sector continues, even when people aren't able to gather together. And I know we've all seen, and I've been incredibly impressed in the ways that arts organizations have continued to support and take care of their communities during this moment, during the pandemic. But we also know that model isn't sustainable. It's not sustainable because our work is about gathering and bringing people together. We also know that the business model is not sustainable and that many of our organizations are having to make tough decisions about the financial future of their organizations. So what does that all mean? It means that we are in this for the long haul, that there is not going to be a quick recovery for the Commonwealth or for our sector, and that it's going to require very long-term sustained advocacy and policy work. And that's where MASSCreative continues to work, and we continue to plan on being here for the creative and cultural sector. Our work is about interpreting policy into action. It's about providing you with real-time policy updates and opportunities to take action, making sure that you're informed and confident when you go to speak and connect with elected officials and decision makers. Through this next period, we are going to be working and strategizing on what are the right policy recommendations to respond to this moment, to make sure that we are responding to what is happening in terms of budget recommendations that come out on the federal and the state level. And we are committed to doing that in partnership with all of you. So that is where we are headed and where we plan on continuing. So now I'm going to move on to our normally scheduled programming about policy updates. First, the other day, the House passed the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act. This provides some really important changes to the Paycheck Protection Program that helps employers continue to stay financially viable in this moment. It was sent to the Senate for vote, and we expect a vote for that next week. On the state level, Governor Baker signed the unemployment self-insurance insured nonprofit, signed Senate Bill 2618 into law on Wednesday. This includes a really important 120-day delay on nonprofits that need to repay unemployment contributions. This is not the end of the road for this issue, and we continue in partnership across the nonprofit sector to advocate on the federal and the state level for 100% forgiveness for this issue. We also got some information this week that was pretty sobering in terms of what we're looking at in terms of the budget, the state budget. So the Massachusetts Taxpayers Foundation, a budget think tank in Massachusetts, delivered some grim news, which is the estimated revenue shortfall for fiscal year 21 is up to $6 billion. That represents a 20% loss from last year. There's also in their modeling, they've also forecasted out that there will be tax revenue shortfalls through the year fiscal 25. So earlier in this crisis, there had been a real hope that the economy was going to either be a V or a U. And now there's more information and it's starting to feel like it's going to be a much wider U. I'm sure I'm out of frame at that point. And so that's going to mean that we are going to see that if this comes true, there will be a number of years of restricted budgets. So, House Ways and Means Chair Aaron Michaelwitz shared his plans that this continues to be a very difficult budget to put together for fiscal year 21, and it's going to mean some very difficult choices. Again, this doesn't mean that we've given up, and it doesn't mean that we as a sector don't deserve to be included in a spending plan for fiscal year 21. We're working really closely with the Mass Cultural Council on this, as well as all of you, and you can expect more advocacy updates about this issue in the coming weeks. So I just want to touch briefly that the reopening plan, the guidance is still being developed for phases 2 through 4. So and it seems as though they are flying the plane and building it at the same time. So we are collecting your questions. If you have a question about any phase of the reopening plan, you'll see in the chat box a link to a form. Share all of your questions with us. We are collecting these. We are going to send them in to the reopening committee, and we're also going to use these as our guide to help shape how we are providing education and resource to all of you. So please help us in that effort. Next, I want to shift to talk about education. So with the revenue shortfalls that are being projected, that means that a number of sectors and a number of areas are going to be especially hard hit. Education is one of them. And that's going to be from both a state level and a municipal level, where we know that, cities and towns look to their municipal tax base to pay for education. The school committees and superintendents are right now trying to work on their plans for next fall and the next school year. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, Commissioner Jeffrey Riley announced this week that they are working on guidance for how schools can reopen in the fall, and they expect to release that guidance in mid-June. The areas that guidance are going to cover include teaching and learning, physical and virtual learning environments, and then really importantly, behavioral health and social and emotional learning for young people. This is where we need to take real direct action. And that has to do with making sure that schools and school districts, when they are making these difficult choices, do not cut arts education out of their curriculum plans or their funding plans. If history is any indicator, we know that the arts and arts education tends to be at the top of the list when budget cuts are made. And so we are going to share an advocacy action you can take to address that in a couple of minutes. So I'm going to turn it over to Tracy, who's going to talk about our advocacy actions for this week. Thanks all.
Hi everyone. So this week's top actions include Emily's update on advocating for arts education. And then we also want you to keep going on reaching out to your members of Congress, either through email or through calling, since the next stimulus package is also really important. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking through 2 different actions you can take to advocate for arts education. All right, so the best voices for arts education are parents and teachers and students. That is who the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education considers experts, obviously, on education. And so we really want to activate those in our networks that are parents and teachers and students. So if you're a parent, if you're an educator, if you're a student, excellent. If you're not, this is still for you. We want you to think of the parents and teachers and educators in your network and encourage them to take these actions. That is really helpful in helping to ripple out this impact. So for parents and educators, the tactic that we're encouraging you to take is to write a letter to the editor. So for those of you who join us every week, thank you, because this is a refresher for you. Letters to the editor are really important in getting topics out front that maybe aren't covered through articles or interviews or other sources. So we have a template here on arts education that you can submit to your local paper. We also have tips for writing an LTE, which we covered a couple weeks ago, but we want to remind you about that. All right, so that is the first action, writing a letter to the editor. The second is for young people or students is to create a self-portrait petition. So we know that lots of people are being creative right now, as always, and we want to capture that in our outreach to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So we created this template that allows you to draw or glue or glitter in your self-portrait. And also share about why creativity connects young people to the world. So that's the top half of the petition. And then the bottom half of the petition, this is where we encourage young people to fill in their superintendent's, their principal's name, and then add a little bit more of their story. This is where we make the formal ask to those decision-making bodies to include arts education in education plans through the summer and into the fall. And that's regardless of whether students are learning from home or back in the classroom. Arts education needs to be a dedicated part of the school day where a dedicated art teacher is delivering that to them. So if you are helping a young person, a tiny young person do this, the steps are really easy. This is also, I mean, we made this to make it really user-friendly. So you can literally hand it to a kid and they'll know what to do. But if you want to take a young person through it, there's a PDF printable that you can download. Steps are really easy. Have them fill in their portrait, help them fill out the rest of the petition. We invite you to post a picture on social media so that we can see your artwork, the world can see your artwork, and it helps to encourage other people to take the same action and helps to create that ripple effect. And then the last piece is to actually deliver the petition. We want these to be sent to your school superintendent, your principal, your school committee, and that information should be really easy to find just by going to your school district's website. So those are the two top actions for advocating on behalf of arts education. For parents and teachers, educators, write a letter to the editor, and for young people to do a portrait petition. But like always, there's lots of other things you can do if you have the energy and the time and the resources. So we know we introduce lots of actions, new action every week to you. Those are all cataloged under the advocacy portion of our website. And thanks to Selassie for putting all of those links in the chat box so that all of that is really accessible to you. All right, back to Emily.
Thanks, Tracy. And I just also want to acknowledge and thank the rest of the MASSCreative team. Selassie, Sophia, and Danny are all on this call and are all making our work possible together. So thank you, everyone on Team MASSCreative. So like every week, we welcome your feedback. It is an important part of how we create these weekly webinars and direct our work. So feel free and don't be shy. The other thing that I want to just address is, I think in the chat box, Leland asked if MASSCreative has a seat on the reopening board. No, we do not. That doesn't mean that our work does not continue. It doesn't mean that we are not having conversations with members of the Office of Economic Development who are supporting and staffing that reopening board and working to reach out to those reopening board members. That is also another place where if you have those relationships, you should feel free to continue to make sure that they know how important our sector is. And that we have questions. The other thing that I just want to briefly take a beat on in the last moment of this is that earlier this week, we announced a job search. Tracy Konopinski, a couple weeks ago, announced she is leaving MASSCreative on June 26th to focus on the next phase of her career. We are incredibly indebted to the work that Tracy has done over the last 7 years at MASSCreative. Thank you, Tracy. Yesterday was her 7-year work anniversary at MASSCreative. And we are now on the search to find a director of engagement and organizing who is going to be the senior staff member who's going to lead our advocacy work. We sent out an email earlier this week. I'm hopeful that one person on my team might be able to drop the link to that job description in the chat box. I'm sorry, Celeste, I did not include that in our list of links already. But we are looking far and wide. So if there's someone in your network who you feel like might be a good fit, please send them our way. We are really excited to bring a new person into our work and continue to build on Tracy's remarkable work over the last 7 years. So that is it for us for today. Thank you all. Our next webinar will be June 25th, and ta-da! MASSCreative has moved into Zoom 21st century. We are no longer going to ask you to fill out a Google form to register. We now have a Zoom form that you will use to register, and will be like when you're registering for many of the other Zoom calls you're on. So thank you very much. We are really glad and glad to have this new piece. Thanks, Selassie, for reminding me we could do this. We hope to see you next week and to continue our work together. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend. Make sure you get a little outside time. Thanks all for your work. Bye now.